Welcome to the Sci-Fi Shorts podcast, the podcast for both readers and writers in the sci-fi genre. Here is your host into the worlds beyond, J. Charles Ramirez.
Welcome back, readers and writers. With me today is Pat Kemp, an experienced contributor to Sci-Fi Shorts. With his exceptionally creative mindset, Pat enjoys painting, guitar, and writing great science fiction, which was inspired by a lifetime of reading, going back to his early childhood and a box of Dr. Seuss books. Pat, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for letting me be here, Jay.
Of course, we'd love to have you. So, your stories, which are the main focus of today's podcast, they seem to tackle a very wide variety of topics and questions, all wrapped up quite neatly in well-realized science fiction settings. With such a wide breadth of topics and situations you can fit in sci-fi, do you find yourself drawn to any particular themes?
And that's two parts for me, because my writing tends to be all over the place. I can write something from just like hard sci-fi, deep space exploration type stuff, and post-apocalyptic things. But for me, reading or watching a show, it's going to be post-apocalyptic if I can get it. I just like the exploration and just trying to survive and digging through the rubble.
I agree. Post-apocalypse seems to be a fan favorite. It's one of my favorites too. In fact, I feel like it's such a great thing to explore the ideas of society, because with post-apocalypse, you got to break it all down and rebuild it from scratch, and you really get to explore the fact or the ideas of will people build the same thing twice? You know, if the United States of America, for instance, was destroyed in an EMP blast, we had to start from scratch, would it be the same country that we know today? And
Yeah.
I think those kind of themes are super enjoyable and just a great way to question society in pretty wonderful environments. But I've also found in particular that your stories really like to subvert expectations. I mean, in your latest piece at Sci-Fi Shorts, which is entitled For the Empire, you wrote substantially about your main character's psionic abilities and how eye contact seemed to be the catalyst for those abilities. At first read, when the climax of the story occurs, you sort of expect this new element that you introduced to be somebody who wasn't emotionally changed, somebody who might have even been blind. You can't get those psionic abilities out from your main character, but instead they seem to be more of a sentient, explosive robot. Do you plan these sorts of subversions, or do they just kind of happen magically for you?
Yes and no. Still, there are sometimes something will click. Like I'll get an image prompt, which is what the For the Empire was one of those. It was an image prompt, and sometimes I'll just have an idea or a different text prompt and just know, okay, I'm going to go with this, and this is how it's going to come out. And then sometimes I got to talk about it. You know, I bounce a lot of stuff off my wife, and I mean, goodness knows she's listened to me talk about my stories forever. She was the one that pushed me to get things out of my head, and that's where the whole medium thing started. But no, I don't always know. I sometimes have to work and twist it to figure out, okay, well, here's the story. What's going to happen at the end? How am I going to I don't want to say shock, that's a little extreme, but how am I going to surprise people? You know, because we only have 1,000 words to do this, and a lot of my setup is setting up the scene, right? So, but
Yeah, for sure.
yeah,
I agree. I spend, if I don't know from the outset what the twist or what that light bulb moment that's going to be in the story, it's really hard to write the scene out and then try and decide exactly where you want to go from there. I mean, some of my best work have been spawned from knowing what those great twists and subversions were going to be right from the beginning. And I've found that stories that I've written to just kind of explore an idea that wasn't really as surprising as some of my other stories would be. I've found those to be some of the longest pieces I've had to sit and ponder over before I can really be happy with the way that they go. Um, but again, I feel like those subversions are really some of the most important parts of writing flash fiction. It's just, sometimes you just need that horse kick in the mouth to try to really add that extra punch there, and just subverting people's formulaic ideas of where your story's going and what's going to happen. While they do have their places, I find that those subversions are some of the best things to read about.
I always have it in the back of my head that, okay, is this cliche? Is this something someone's going to figure out?
Mhm.
And that's another driving force for me is to try to avoid that if I can. Not always easy.
Yeah, it's a very delicate balancing act, especially for me, because I try and drop so many hints that you actually have to, that if you don't dig for those hints or you aren't like instantly aware of them, sometimes they can be too subtle. I've written a lot of short stories where the names of the characters tells you all that you need to know about the story, or the fact that like maybe it was a masculine name, but if you took the feminine name and then you extrapolated that to what that name is is referring to in the long run, then you can kind of see where the story is going. Actually, I had written a short recently where the main protagonist, their name was Oleg, which was a feminine or was a masculine reproduction of the name of Olga, which was also itself a reference to a saintess of vengeance, and the whole story centered around vengeance. But you didn't know that until the last like 3 or 4 lines, and and I wrote that, and I was thinking about it the whole time. I was like, nobody's probably going to understand this other than me, but it's fun to put it in there anyways.
Yeah, totally.
But after diving into your own writing history a bit, I did want to speak a little bit more particularly about a story that you can that has been displayed on the Sci-Fi Shorts webpage since its inception. It's one of our free stories that we like to share with everybody. It's the story entitled EMA 7. At its core, it's a story about a blossoming self-awareness in a robot who should not have the capacity for that sort of thing, and the reactionary choices, basically, of the humans who was in charge of EMA. Can you speak a little bit about the thought process that brought you to write that short?
Oh, yeah. MS7 was one of my darlings because I mean, I have a set of characters that, and if you go onto the Medium page, you'll see a story where I'm being accosted by a bunch of on a bus to work by a bunch of my characters because I haven't been writing about them and they're mad. MS7 is one of those things that has been on the percolator for quite some time. Starting out as a play by email character, really. And it was just, I would type up a paragraph of stuff, send it off to somebody who would collect these from a bunch of people and type up a paragraph of what happened, and we go back and forth on that. And that's developed quite a bit since then. Because, again, it comes down to my love of the post-apocalyptic. If you're familiar with a game system from way back called Gamma World, it's, I don't even know if it's, I think it might be in print still, but the fantasy Fallout type of post-apocalyptic.
Right.
So Emma started out as Emma is EMA, emergency medical android, 7th of the one produced, and just like number 5 is alive, she's developed a consciousness, and it was discovered that this consciousness was happening, and she was shut down for it. So, but she's been around for a while, and it's part of a greater story, to be honest.
That's always it's a favorite of mine as well. As you saying, like you have these well crafted characters that you've been percolating, to use your words, for quite a long time. I've done that with many of my short stories myself. In fact, most of the early shorts that I've ever done were just kind of explorations to see if um, longer form fiction would fit that character or that situation. So it's like, even though you might only get 1,000 words with this character in this particular instance, it's just another step in their furthering of evolution, as far as, like you said, a larger story. But the story itself does open with a comment of circuitry coming online. It gives the reader the knowledge that we're talking about a robot or some sort of mechanical creation, but it reads sort of parallel to the idea of a brain waking back up from a coma, maybe. Then that line that you had there, I believe it was in the third paragraph, it said, "I like having a choice." I mean, you can infer pretty much all the context of that story from just that introductory line there. What in particular were you trying to portray in just that moment?
So that startup was pretty much what you had said. It was just, I was trying to illustrate her waking up. And well, she's an android, so there'd be a boot process. But then these memories flit in there, and she starts remembering things, like the doctor's face that's coming close to her and laughing at her, and all that stuff. As she boots up, these memories come in. So yeah, that's pretty much it. She made these choices, and it caused her to be shut down, and then she's waking up again, and she's remembering this stuff. And I like having a choice says a lot, because she's remembering that she had the choice, right?
Exactly.
And she liked the idea that she had the choice, because choice equals freedom.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking the same thing, that the wording, the way that you put it, was the most clever thing. I mean, it shows a history, it shows a preconceived thought process. This wasn't something that was new to Ema, but it was something that they have already had a history with. And even though they were shut down for however so many years that you wrote about,
Yeah.
257, something around that range, but this was something that they remembered, something that persisted, even though they were shut down for that long length of time. Now, another theme that I kind of gleaned from your short story was the interplay of fear and of longing. It was pretty consistent throughout the entire read there. It's interesting how human those kinds of emotions are. And as you put it at the end, androids aren't supposed to be frightened. They're not supposed to have these human emotions. So what do you think makes Ema so special, that she was able to have, to have that kind of realization, that evolution there?
So I don't think when I was creating and writing her, I didn't actually give it much thought to why. No, I mean, serious. I mean, it sounds kind of silly when you put all this effort into a character,
Yeah.
but then there's so much that you go on assumptions as well,
Mhm.
because what makes us human, and I mean, really, we're just a bunch of circuits.
Mhm.
It's wet, but it's a bunch of circuits, right?
Yeah.
And then for
Computer
her,
wrapped in flesh and meat.
exactly. Um, and I think Cyberpunk kind of explores all of that kind of stuff too. I mean, look at the Matrix, right?
Mhm.
So it's all taking place in your head, and it's all taking place in her head. As far as what really is astounding is, where does the emotion come from?
Mhm.
You know, she's scared. What is fear? Fear of dying, right?
Mhm.
Why are you afraid to die? I mean, if you're working from a pure logical sense, you're shutting down. You shouldn't care. There's no fear. There's no.
Mhm.
So there's longing there. There's maybe she's worried about missing out. Will there be pain? I don't think
Right.
I've addressed too much about what she can feel, but those are the things that drive us. We'll
Mhm.
put up with a lot of pain in order to not die, right?
Exactly.
So
Yeah. And you also noted in the story that you had a line that one of the scientists had said. It was, machines cannot evolve. Now, do you think that because of Ema's kind of awakening intelligence, basically, do you think that changed her, like, intrinsically at that point, no longer a machine, basically?
Well, I mean, like we had said earlier, we were all machines in a sense.
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, I'm still of the mindset machines can't evolve. I mean, you need an outside force to really make a change, and that needs to replicate. So, and I mean, if some car accidentally ended up with five wheels,
Mhm.
it's not going to produce another car with five wheels, right? And then so on and so on. So at its base, machines can't evolve in that
Mhm.
sense. But what's to say that a brain that's made of AI and advanced circuitry? I think I even use the idea of if you bring this out further,
Mhm.
like I said, she's part of a greater story.
Right.
The brain is organic.
Mhm.
The actual brain is organic. That changes, that evolves, and perhaps that's where her emotions come from.
Hmm.
So
That's interesting to think about. I mean, it's like I said, these kinds of stories make you question so much about like what you know, what you believe, and things of that nature. And exploring these new avenues is definitely thrilling and enjoyable. And I also did really enjoy the commentary this story can make on society as a whole. I always try and and look at the themes and the way that things are written and try and see like how it fits in like the real world. I mean, how often do our own human emotions, our fear, our desire, our thoughts, and more, how do those impact other people around us, especially in a society where those sorts of individual traits, might not be favorably looked upon, especially in, for the example, like an employer-employee relationship. The human factor can cause a lot of mischief and mayhem and things that might not be quite uh, ideal in the real world where you're working with hard facts, hard data, stuff of that nature. But everything that makes us like unique individual can be cause for alarm in a society. And it was portrayed quite beautifully in there with the way that the researchers, the scientists reacted to Ema's experience.
so yeah, those two researchers. You have the good cop, bad cop, the devil and the angel situation going on here.
Mhm.
Um, it's apparent to both of them, and it comes apparent to both of them that she's more than what she started out to be.
Right.
And like he says, that there are some repercussions to that because at one point, if you admit that Emma's alive, and then you start talking about rights,
Mhm.
the person has a right to be alive, right? But right to their own choices, right to their own being. Not to mention the, I say this in the story, the religious
Mhm.
implications. How is that going to change society as a whole? So you have one guy who's like, well, we got to shut it down. We can't let this out. And then you have the other researcher going, hey, wait a minute. She deserves to live.
Mhm. Yeah, it's again, it's a hard question with no real good answers. There's good and bad in everything, and especially with a situation like this and the questions that it causes you to ask yourself, like you were saying, like how is this going to fit in society as a whole? You kind of have to rewrite everything from the ground up. Now you have a whole new sort of sentient sapient life that you have to account for and how it relates to the human experience and humans that already exist. So speaking about that, do you think there's any more short stories for Ema coming through in the future? Is her story still to be told?
Yeah, and she's along with, if you look at some of the other work I've done, there's that Jack Stone story
Hmm.
where he's been up in the station for forever and finally decides to kill himself by jumping into a lifeboat spacecraft
Hmm.
and going back to Earth that way, hoping to burn up. I mean, Emma, Jack. I have two other characters, Jack and Gannis. They're all part of that same universe, post-apocalyptic. Fallout. I love the Fallout series,
Hmm.
and so yeah, there's a good chance that Emma's going to be uh, not just a character there, but maybe one of the main characters there.
It's something to definitely look forward to. I always like seeing characters and stories evolve and grow beyond, just their inceptions, basically. So I really do hope you have some more great shorts coming out featuring those characters. We'll all be looking forward to it. But let me just thank you again, Pat, for your time and insight. I mean, it was truly a pleasure to be able to sit down and talk with you today, and especially talk about your work and your inspirations. But before we leave, do you have any projects that you're actually currently working on that we can look forward to in the near future?
Well, I mean, I'll continue with the stories, and the bigger story of I call it the Purity series, which is the underlying world that Emma's part of. And I also have a fantasy series that you don't see too much because mainly I'm running for Sci-Fi Shorts right now.
Right.
Where I have another old character who's been around for a while and deserves some time.
Yeah, it's all your characters, like you said, are fighting for the spotlight in your stories. But it's definitely something to look out for and look forward to. And I'm sure all of our listeners will definitely keep an eye out for any continued stories out from your side. But to read any more of Patrick's writing, check out his author profile over at sci-fi-shorts.co, including the story that we reviewed today, EMA 7, or you can visit his Medium page for some of his older works. For all of us here at Sci-Fi Shorts, thank you for your time, happy writing, and good luck discovering your own new worlds. Thank you very much.
Sci-Fi Shorts and the Sci-Fi Shorts podcast are products of SFS Publishing. Music by Valence.